You are Locked On Hawks Postcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Hawks Postcast, your home for the best Atlanta Hawks talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me is NBA college basketball analyst DeShaun Tate, of course, NBA analyst as well. Today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And of course, our Locked On Hawks Postcast is also part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So yay, they mounted a comeback, but boo, why do they even need one? We'll talk about that. And high school DeShaun, high school Tenitra, who would they have liked to have seen back in the day? We'll discuss, but first let's talk takes on how the Hawks snapped an 8-game skid Monday, but fell back to earth in a 126-125 loss to the Spurs tonight. And Tate, you said for you, your take was that transition defense also told the story.
For sure, because I feel like, Tenitra, we always keep talking about the same things over and over. Yes, obviously the free throws. As soon as we start getting north of 80% barely, then we start dipping back into the 70s again. Not good, and also not new news for this team. I think you can say the same thing, obviously, about the turnovers, right? A lot of these not being forced turnovers. But it's that transition defense. I think that, really kind of was like an Achilles heel for the team on tonight. You let, a San Antonio Spurs team get out and have almost double the amount of transition baskets than the Atlanta Hawks. That doesn't bode well for them, especially considering the team that the fact that the Hawks is one of those teams that like to get out and run so much. Yeah. They're ranked amongst one of the best teams in the NBA in terms of pace. But you have to know, some of this maybe shouldn't come as a surprise, because that guy who had his debut opportunity in the Spurs uniform on tonight is probably one of the best in terms of pace than anybody, and knows how to get the break started and, get some of those outlet passes going. And obviously you've got a guy as tall and lengthy and lanky and gangly as Victor Wembanyama is. He's still youthful with youthful enough legs that he can get up and down the floor relatively quickly, obviously, for a guy that size. And so when you have somebody, like that can trail on the break, just in case there is a missed shot, he can follow up with some dunks coming off the back iron, or maybe even get the ball kicked out to him at the top of the key for a three and be able to knock that down too. All of those are counting in terms of transition baskets. And I think that's something that really hurt the Hawks on tonight, because to be honest, not only is that kind of like a system, if you will, or just something that I don't think they've seen a lot of this year, but also not every team is running, Victor Wembanyama. Mama ain't giving birth to Victor Wembanyama talented type guys every day. When you put that with De'Aaron Fox, it's just kind of a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, and of course, De'Aaron Fox, obviously, we know, parted ways with the Kings in a trade. So he comes to the Spurs and balls out just like you would expect him to do. 24 points, 13 assists. So a nice little double-double night for him. That part, bad for the Hawks, but later on we'll talk about why that's actually good for the Hawks among some other moves that these Kings are making these days. But yeah, that one, of course, was sort of one of the death knells for the Hawks tonight. Like you mentioned, it was just one of those games where you look at the Hawks and you look at the Spurs and you're thinking transition. Hey, that's the name of the game for the Hawks. And you're looking at how the Spurs were able to really capitalize on some breakdowns defensively, especially early, because DeShaun, you're talking about 22 points in less than 6 minutes from the Spurs. That tells you just how much they were planning to run, probably why this game got out of control for a while, where the Hawks found themselves down by 20. And ultimately, although that score is super, super close at the end, but ultimately it's the kind of thing that you look back and you say, well, hey, that's kind of why you were up with one game, hoping that you would get 2 in a row after losing 8 straight. And now we're back to talking about why the Hawks found themselves in the losing column again, or finding themselves taking an L again. And I agree with you when I start to kind of dig into the numbers and I look at, okay, what are some of the things that maybe here and there, the Hawks could have had an opportunity if they would have just done the little things right, and they didn't get there. So my take was, and I know this might sound a little bit corny, so bear with me and my corniness tonight, but the big fundamentals old team got the best of the Hawks fundamentally. And of course, you guys know history. You know we're talking about Tim Duncan, the San Antonio Spurs great, also known as the big fundamental. And that's exactly what his team did in just enough spaces and places that the Hawks didn't do it in order to be able to walk away with a win tonight, starting in one of those pesky areas that you already mentioned. That, yeah, we're going to keep mentioning it because it's the kind of thing that when you lose a game by 1 point or 4 points or 8 points, like they did a couple times during that 8-game skid, we're going to look to see what you did with turnovers. So you end up with 20 turnovers tonight. And in the first quarter alone, 5, and obviously it averages 5 across quarters. But the thing about that first quarter is fundamentally the Spurs were sound because they only had 1. And then they end the game with 10 turnovers. And that's that one little thing that when you get into a tight game could make all the difference with a point. You know where I'm going with the other one, right? The next one, free throws. If you're going to shoot, or if the Spurs are going to shoot, and they weren't quite fundamentally sound there, but walk with me through this. If they're going to shoot 75%, DeShaun, don't you think you need to be shooting a little bit better than 72.2%?
That's true.
That too could actually get you a W, right? And when you think about the fact that you took just a couple more shots than they did, again, you make a couple more of those shots, DeShaun, Tate, and I are having a different conversation tonight. So it's when I look down in those areas, and yes, you only lost the game by 1 point tonight. But again, these are those same pesky things that probably cost you at least 2 or 3 games in that skid that you had. And then you think about the fact that you're about to host Milwaukee. And those are the types of mistakes that you simply can't afford to make. That's when it concerns me, because I don't like that it's a pattern. I don't like you and I are probably talking about the same pesky situation, the turnovers, the missed free throws in critical moments, the lack of transition defense in critical moments, because if we're continuing to talk about it, that's the type of thing that puts you in a situation where you're about to play these Bucks. You dropped your last game. Granted, haven't seen them in a while, but you dropped your last game to them by 8 points. But that game wasn't quite even that close because of these same petty problems that continue to have no matter who is in that starting lineup, no matter who's coming off that bench.
And I'm glad that you mentioned something about those free throws, because people are like, well, why are you harping on them so much? And it seems like every show. First of all, and I'll explain that here in a second, but first and foremost, I don't think that I want to be on a basketball team being coached by, Coach Tenitra, because I got a feeling that if they're not doing anything else in practice on tomorrow or whenever this next practice is going to be, they're just going to be shooting free throws for the entire practice, I'm sure. These are game, and I think to kind of add fire to or gas to the fire or whatever, what have you, is the fact that a lot of these games that they're not shooting as well as they're not from the line are 1 possession losses and 2 possession losses, things that free throws can make that difference in. I mean, think about it. When they just played in their last game in that win against the Pistons, they shot 82% from the line. While that probably isn't anything to call home to mom about, but
it's what you called out. It's
that was exactly. That was a 10% difference between tonight and in the last game, 72 versus 82. So I don't think that helps. And then you start talking about the transition defense, and even in the offensive from that standpoint, when I mentioned, that San Antonio is able to get up and down the floor and create some of those transition baskets. This is kind of where you do miss somebody like a Jalen Johnson, who sometimes say, here, give me the ball. I'm going to go coast to coast. I don't care about all the opposition uniforms in front of me with all my teammates behind me. I'm taking this to the rim. They kind of missed that a little bit as kind of like a point forward a little bit. And then lastly, I will say this little bit that I do think is somewhat a silver lining, if I had to find one for the Hawks on tonight, as far as paint points. There ain't many times you're going to find who I have no question is going to be the future face of this league in Victor Wembanyama, the way that he can alter shots, the way that he can score it inside as well, as dominant as he is. And then the Atlanta Hawks doesn't have a Clint Capella for the little that he does, or the Jalen Johnson in the front court for the lot that he does on the offensive side. They were still able to outscore San Antonio in the paint as well. So, I do think that there is a little bit of some silver lining, something you can kind of appreciate, especially when the Hawks are outmanned in the front court specifically.
Exactly. And just speaking of that, just to confirm, Quint Snyder was asked pregame about Clint Capella's asked for personal reasons. He, quote, Clint's been one of our most consistent and respectful players on our team. Those situations that everyone can respect, private things that I'm not going to comment anymore on than I just. So, of course, whatever's going on with CC, we definitely wish him well for being out tonight for personal reasons. Now, speaking of, we know it was only a 1-point loss, if you will, but the Hawks mounted a comeback to get to that 1-point loss. But then again, why did they have to mount a comeback in the first place? We'll talk about it in the and one. This episode of our Locked On Hawks postcast is brought to you by Game Time. Looking for tickets to your next big event? Whether it's a concert, a comedy show, or a sports game, finding the right ticket at the right price can be a headache. But with Game Time Picks, it's never been easier. Let me tell you how it works. With Game Time Picks, the app does all the hard work for you. It curates the best deals, so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. And the curated deals make it super simple to find great tickets at a great price. No more sifting through thousands of options. And the seat view features is a game changer. Before you even hit buy, you can see exactly where your seat will be, what it will look like in the venue, and that is pretty cool. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Now, terms do apply, but again, create an account and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So DeShaun, it was kind of like two sides of the same coin, if you will, where woohoo, the Hawks were down by 20 at one point, and they mounted comeback. But then again, so woohoo, because what the heck were you doing down by 20 to a team like the San Antonio Spurs, who have a record that's pretty much identical to yours? Why did it even come to that? But first things first, you ended segment one on a positive note. So I'm going to take the DeShaun Tate route and road, and I'm going to go for the higher road first and say, what did the Hawks actually do well to be able to mount a near comeback tonight?
Yeah, for whatever reason, I think they kind of found a way to just kind of muster up being able to hit some shots. I mean, there was at one point in time specifically, I know in the first half, where it just feels like they couldn't really get things going. And I think that sometimes you kind of overanalyze that or just kind of overthink. Sometimes I think they're overthinking it sometimes, where shots, it appears that it's getting frustrating for them when shots are just not falling and shots are just not going down. And it starts to become mental more than it is about the mechanics, because it's one thing for shots not to be able to go in, but the opposition is closing out well, playing good defense, things of that nature. And that's not to say that, San Antonio wasn't playing decent defense, but in those moments where you can't even count on your bread and butter to fall for you, sometimes it plays into you a little bit more so, like, mentally. So it's like, let's just try and switch it up and try and do something different. Maybe we'll get lucky and, hit a couple shots. And so, their defense also kind of, stepped up. Ironic thing is all these things start to kind of really come together for the Atlanta Hawks towards the tail end and of the game. And with there being so many games still remaining left over on the other side of the All-Star break, it's a habit that you don't want to consistently be known for having. The fact that that you have to try and string together some runs late to try and keep the game close, because everybody's not going to do that. And everybody's not the San Antonio Spurs, and everybody's not the Detroit Pistons, which I know it didn't come to that for them. But even against some of the teams that the Hawks should probably beat or put a little bit of it, slight asterisk on it because we understand the injury situation. But even in those, games where they should definitely either be beating some opponents or opponents shouldn't be keeping it that close for Atlanta, they're just not as good despite the injury situation. They tend to kind of let some of these teams either hang around or get a lead on them and they still have to fight back. Yes, credit for them, because I feel like we keep on hearing the same thing over and over. I don't think people realize that this is something as bad as it is because we're getting a little bit spoiled with the fact that, and give them credit, but spoiled with the fact that Atlanta's hanging around with teams. Atlanta is competing. Like, we're glorifying them competing now, for crying out loud. And I get it. We understand who's playing and who's on the floor and who's not. But if I'm just being honest, it's kind of starting to feel like competing is just competing is getting a little like just tiresome. Just feeling like you're repeating the same thing over and over and the results aren't changing at all.
Right. And I think we'll talk about that in a second, whether or not this team is really competing in a different way and kind of what does that competition look like, not just post All-Star, but also post trade deadline. But I agree with you. I'll give it a positive spin, but I still don't like having to give it a positive spin in the fact that the third quarter is always typically that pesky quarter for the Hawks where the other team storms back and makes it a game. And sometimes the third quarter then is the death of the Hawks and they lose. At least tonight, the third quarter wasn't the death of them. That's actually where they mounted the comeback. They actually outscored the Spurs 43-31 and made it a game. So I like the fact that if you have to be down 20, at least the place where every other team comes back on you, you actually mounted the comeback. So I do like that. And let's see, Yosemite Blam. It says this ain't horseshoes. I like the Hawks team, but come on. I'm not sure. I guess you got to school me on what he means by this ain't horseshoes.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not much of a basketball reference as far as I'm concerned. But I do like this one from Robert.
Say it, Robert. Say it, Blackman. You know how to come through. That's our guy. See, we're speaking his language and he's speaking our language.
There you go.
Whenever DeShaun have to talk about that other pesky thing in a game, the random role player, the RRP, nothing bothers Locked On Hawks Postcast more than a random role player.
That's right.
I don't give a darn who the hell is Jeremy Sochan. I don't care. Like the fact that, and I'm so glad he actually mentioned it because, Robert, it's a perfect time for you to mention that because that was the other thing I was going to say. Why would the Hawks even have to mount a comeback? Like, why are we talking about this? Part of the reason is exactly what you said, Robert, which is that RRP, in addition to what Jeremy did, by the way, it was the entire bench outscoring the bench 34-16. This can't happen. That just can't happen. But one of the reasons, and agree, because we talked about the turnovers, he knows the rhythm of this show. We talked about the missed free throw. He knows the rhythm of this show. So at any one of those points, if any one of those things went a different way, DeShaun and I and Robert Blackman, by the way, are all having a different conversation right now. But that said, you look at a game like tonight, and then you look at what the Pistons, but also DeShaun, you look at what happened in those 8 games leading up to finally breaking through and getting back into the win column. And it kind of makes you think, okay, where are these Hawks heading? Like, what's going on for them? Where do they kind of see themselves as the season wears on? And we're kind of coming to one of those marks in time where you got to make a decision. The Sacramento made that decision. They decided, hey, we're going to go out with Jonas Valanciunas. Obviously, they decided they were De'Aaron Fox as well. Their team that we're going to think something that really could potentially shake us up, and I wouldn't call it getting them into a real playoff conversation, but I will say that maybe keeps them in a play-in conversation in the Western Conference. But that said, maybe the Hawks kind of, by not doing anything, because today that could work out in their favor. They've got that top 12 pick. Kings have to get into the race that might actually help the Hawks. But for you, do you see the Hawks themselves doing anything to actually help their case between now and tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern time, also known as the trade deadline?
Yeah, I don't know, Tenitra. I mean, as much as I want to say, and I feel like me, along with so many others, are always saying like, okay, sitting back and waiting on pins and needles, like on the edge of our seat, looking to see what the team is going to do. And it feels like they just never do anything when it comes to
Mhm.
trades or even get active in free agency and things like that. So
Mhm.
as I'm definitely not holding my breath on it by any means, but
Yeah.
it would be nice to see them do that, not just because we just like to see our team just be active and just
Right.
trying to do something to
Just
get better,
because. Yeah.
but they also have big time needs
Mhm.
in terms of trying to put something together for this team and add some more
Right.
talent around it. Listen, I think that not having that backup point guard is something that really really hurts when you start looking at what they had the year that they went to the Eastern Conference Finals. Being able to have somebody like a Lou Williams who played it a little bit sparingly from here and there, even though he didn't do anything for the team. Having a guy like a Rajon Rondo at one point in time, they at least tried
Yeah.
to go out there and go get somebody to just show that they were at least trying. The injury
No.
situation up front with Jalen Johnson. And then, of course, you have Onyeka Okongwu, who were just for the first time in 4 years, maybe starting to see him play significant, extensive starters type minutes. Now you don't have really anybody to back that up. So I
But
do
that
think.
said,
Mhm,
but let me ask you this though.
mhm.
At the end of the day, honestly, I hear what you're saying because we've always been talking about for the last couple of weeks, at least not always, but we started off the conversation, we found out about Kobe being down for the season. Then things kind of switched gears when Dave Johnson that he'd be done for the season. So it was okay. Do you go for trade, giving him a backup point, or do you go for support?
I think what you have to do, Tenitra, to be honest with you, is you have to try to get somebody who can play multiple positions at least well, right? You have to do some of these things by committee. And that's why I think we, had a conversation that, or have been looking at, and I know we had this conversation at least about a week or two ago when we was thinking about, should they entertain the idea of somebody like a Brandon Ingram, right? Which I know that there have been some recent reports by Bleacher Report recently, and just kind of talking about it being pretty much a two-team race between them and the Toronto Raptors, between the Hawks and the Raptors. So just from that standpoint alone, I think that having someone having somebody like him who can play as a situational big, play as a, and make no mistake about it, he's not a point guard by any means, but being by committee, a somewhat of a primary ball handler situationally. Obviously, his position that he is known to play and probably thrives at or just excels in the most successful at, I would say obviously is like the three position or the four. So being able to defend multiple positions, being able to take advantage of guys that are smaller than him, and also benefit by being slightly quicker, just more talented than some of the typical bigs that are kind of more like stiffs. Some of the different power forwards in this league that doesn't have the agility that somebody like a Brandon Ingram has. So those are just a couple of the things that I think a player like him, maybe not that particular player, because a lot of people are going to say, well, does he kind of, fit into the system? How does he fit for the Atlanta Hawks? And I don't think it's bad by any stretch of the imagination. I just think that there's certain things about him that I think fit really well from a talent standpoint, from that perspective. And then there's other things about him that I believe um are just optically not good traits sometimes. And so for a guy who had oftentimes been compared to somebody like a Kevin Durant, if you will, I think that seeing that and hearing that for so many years. And granted, we're not saying he's any Kevin Durant, but if there's anything remotely close to a diet version, a guy that could play some offense, and who knows, as much as a, defensive anchor that a Dyson Daniels is, maybe he has that ability to be able to rub off on somebody like a Brandon Ingram and light that fire underneath the belly. And I think that he's potentially looking for a new home. And I think that it would just be a pretty good fit. If not nothing else, is showing you're trying, because you better believe, and I'm not saying things going to happen. Obviously, I don't know. But seeing all this movement around the league, I think something we kind of underestimate sometimes is who's really paying attention. I think that Trae Young is taking note of some of the things that's happening and some of the different, franchises that are choosing to be active to put better players around the players that they already have.
Indeed. Well, speaking of better players, the best player was around some high school players at tonight's game. I wonder who DeShaun and I would have wanted that to be. We'll talk about it when we come back in What's Next. This episode of our Locked On Hawks postcast is brought to you by BetterHelp. What are some of your relationship green flags? We often hear about the red flags we should avoid, but what if we focused more on identifying the positive signs in our relationships, those green flags? If you're not sure what they look like, we can help you identify them actively and even embody that like energy yourself, whether you're dating, married, building a friendship, or just working on yourself. Therapy can help you form relationships that love you back. Therapy helps you develop healthy boundaries and improves your communication skills, empowers you to set clear expectations and express your needs in relationships. And it provides tools for managing conflict in ways that strengthen your connections rather than break them down. So BetterHelp makes it easy by offering online therapy with over 30,000 therapists to choose from. And if you need to switch therapists, you can do so at no extra cost. So discover your relationship green flags with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. So a cool thing happened at night. Our guy Brad reported and mentioned him because his brother is actually the coach of the Appalachian High School basketball team that had a chance to meet Dominique Wilkins tonight, courtesy of the Hawks, and our guy, the brand communications director for the Hawks, Max Strauss. So this, of course, is the school that endured the shooting attack last year. So always good to hear something positive happening for them. And not only did they have the chance to meet but they also got a chance to see Wemby warm up. So if you, DeShaun, had to see any one player or one team back in your high school days, who would it be or what team would it be?
I'm not sure that anyone will ever be able to outmatch MJ for me. I don't. That's one
He's
of
saying that as a native Michiganer.
Listen, I mean, no, so I had the opportunity to meet, obviously putting these two together is going to sound really weird. I had the opportunity to meet when I was younger, Isaiah Thomas. And that was like a huge deal. And that was a huge deal then. It would even be a huge deal now. But with that one already crossed off the list, I mean, and also Magic Johnson, another one. I think Michael Jordan's just got to be that one for me. Like, that is literally one of the closest things. I know this is going to sound a bit much because, yes, obviously, I'm on the MJ.
I already know where you're going with it and can't disagree with that.
That is one of the closest things to perfection in sports that I think I've ever seen. Like, how can you not appreciate that? Like them, love them, hate them, anything in between. Not even just about, the rings and not losing in the finals, but just you knew where the ball is going. Everybody knew it. Everybody on their feet. And it's like he came through every single time. We know that, being a little bit facetious, tongue in cheek a little bit, but who wouldn't want to see and be around that live, especially in your youth? That's incredible.
Oh, I would have to agree with you. Michael Jordan, and even when he didn't have the ball in his hands, he knew where the ball was going, because I can remember him talking about knowing that, hey, Steve Kerr, he looks down the bench and he's like, you're taking the shot, basically. Yeah. And Steve Kerr has to get ready to take that shot. So, I think I don't think there's anyone, really, who can top that. I think that you know how these days, because we have social media that's so prominent and everything is happening real time, and some probably is going IG live. It would be so cool to see if it happened. I'll even say for like my nephews, right? Because they would probably have me FaceTiming, and then they'd be on IG live or TikTok or somewhere live saying, look who the heck pulled up today.
Right.
I cannot think of another other than, and this would probably just be one of those kind of girl power things, because I just came from a women in football symposium, and I'm thinking Serena Williams. Like, yeah, just that. I think she would be the other one whom I might literally just be like,
that's a good one.
Yeah, like I don't know what I would say. I would really have to get myself all the way together. I mean, I would really have to get myself all, especially if you think about high school you, right?
Sure.
Just you and I, we've been in this business for a minute, so there aren't too many people that shake us. Although I will tell you, every time I see Kevin Durant, I have a moment.
Okay, you have a moment.
Yeah, because that's my guy. That's my guy. So I've only said hello to him one time. The other times I just kind of straight ahead, like a couple weeks ago when the Suns played the Hawks in Atlanta. But yeah, there's got to be someone that makes everybody their high school version of themselves. You just know, like if you would have met that person while you were in high school, or you would have seen that player, or had a chance to even see that team. I mean, think about that too. Like even having the opportunity to see the Bulls play in person, I would think would be one of those, or, if depending on which era it is, it might be the Bulls or it might be the Warriors, if you will, just, speaking strictly basketball, or if you're from Michigan, might have been the Pistons at one point. Just that opportunity, I think, for that high school basketball team, it had to be really, really sweet to be able to not just meet Neek, but have the opportunity to see Wemby do some shoot arounds. Pretty darn cool. But I will tell you, there's one more FOMO thing that happened at that game tonight. And I know I talked about it already, but I'm going to talk about it again because it makes me mad. But I was at least happy to be able to gift a friend of mine some tickets tonight, because I knew she would want to see the Hawks and Jagged Edge, which I did not see. Jagged Edge. But man, DeShaun, I need one more time, since I'm still FOMOing about this situation. So much so that I've already told the people at my alma mater that they need to bring Jagged Edge for homecoming. Just saying, Xavier. Yes, put it out there one more time. Who would you have FOMO for? Not seeing.
I don't know. I feel like we had this topic not long ago.
We did, but I'm bringing it back. And it just bothers me that much.
And my answer is still going to be the same. I am such a Sade fan.
I knew
like maybe not.
I
had to go. I had to do it. I haven't seen. Listen, it's just something. The voice, the style, always being herself. Just everything about it. I don't think she's aging at all. I think she's actually going in reverse. She's getting younger. It feels like. I don't know. Sade has definitely got to be right there at the top of the list for me. And let me just ask you this, just real quick, Tenitra. I know we're up against it. Are you more of a Jagged Edge girl than you were a 112 girl?
Of course.
Okay.
That's not even a question.
Okay. I like the 112. I'm gonna go the other way on that one.
The singing doesn't even match. It ain't matching, bro. It ain't match. The R&B ain't R&B in as much with 112 as it is with Jagged Edge. All four of those dudes can just flat out blow.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could say all four of 112 members could hold it down
like
individually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I legit think all four of those guys from Jagged Edge at any point, any of them.
We're gonna have to put a poll up.
That's what I was gonna say. We should have asked you earlier, Robert. Jagged Edge or 112. But Sean, I think that we need to put a poll up and find out what the people say. And look, if you guys actually respond to the poll, I tell you what, we will shout you out on the next postcast, because inquiring minds want to know 112 or Jagged Edge. Locked On Sports Atlanta is the one place to hang out after every game, the number one place, in fact. So remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And for more on the Hawks, check out Locked On Hawks with our guy, Brad Rowland. We will see you next time.